So I work together with the developer of the Flag collection on two modules, Prism of Perception, which is a commercial dual delay and looper, and Prism of Perception, which is a free version of it. In this video, I want to show you a few interesting features of the dual delay and a few ways you can use it. Let's listen to some sounds and then we will start. So as I mentioned, Prism of Perception is a dual delay module that you can use with two individual voices. You can use this with a stereo voice, and it has also an interesting mode for when you're using mono signals, so mono to stereo. Here I have a sequence. I have the 8sec from JW sequencing the FM operator. Right, I will send this to the left channel of the delay, and then I will use both of the outputs, so left and right. Right, you can already see the nice display here in the center. Right now, for now, because I'm using the signal only on the left channel, we will get delay also only on the left. But we can change the feedback path mode with this switch here. So for now it's set to dual mono. Maybe I will zoom in a bit. Right, so it's set now to dual mono, but there is another mode which is called cross. Right, and now the left channel, right, will go to the input of the right channel, and then the right will go to the left, and so on and so forth. Right, so the channels are processing each other, right, and we get a stereo delay with individual controls for each of the channels, right. You can also sync the delay. There is a clock input, and there's a need to use the clock signal to both channels, because again, this is a dual module. So if you want to use it in dual mode, right, the inputs are not normal, so you can use this as a completely dual delay. And now I can change the delay times with the delay knobs, and if you use a clock, they will act as divisions and multiplications of this clock. So here, for example, on the left for now we have a quarter triplet. On the right I can change this, for example, to eighth dotted. Right, so we get different delay times for the left and right, and again, the left will also process the right, and the right will process the left, so you get a really interesting texture in between there. Right, now since we have a stereo delay now, we can also link the channels in two ways and have better control on both at the same time. Right, so here we have the link modes. For now it's off, the link channels. If I click it once, we have the feedback control and the ducking and mixing. We'll look at this later on. We have them linked to the left channel, so now the left will control the right. So if I want to change the mix, this will change to both channels, the same with feedback. Right, also in the right-click menu, if you don't want to link the channels, there is the copy parameters option, so you can switch or move the parameters from left to right, right to left, or just switch between them. Right, so this is also an option. And there's another mode that will basically link everything. You can see all of the controls are now linked to the left, so you can control everything from the left channel. I want to have different delay times, so I'm going to set this to the middle position here. So now again, on the left we have quarter triplets, on the right we have dotted eighths. We can also have the delay running in reverse, right? So in this case, if I change this to the right channel, since we are again in this cross feedback mode, it will cross process to the left channel and back to the right and so on. Right, so what we get now, we get this interesting effect. The delay or the process signal will play forward, will play also backward, because the left is playing forward, but it will be recorded or processed also on the right channel, which is reversed, and the right channel will be processed by the left, which is forward, so we get this interesting texture. I have here also a bass voice. Let me unmute this. This is the ADDR sequencer sequencing the Prodigal Son oscillator, also from Flag, with a nice filter from Surge. And another voice where I'm also using Prism of Perception. Right, there is the Slips sequencer sequencing the VCO going through Thorns, also Flag. Right, in this case, again, I'm using the cross feedback mode, so the left will go to the right and the right will go to the left and so on and so forth. But I'm also modulating, you know what, let me solo this. But I'm also modulating the delay times. They are not synced, but they are always moving. You can see this in the display. You can also reverse, also here the right channel. Right, so we get this interesting effect, this interesting texture, especially when we are modulating the delay times, because again, they will be processed by the other channels, so the left and the right and the right and the left. Right, so everything is sort of cross-recorded between the channels. No clicks, no pops. So you can really get interesting textures and sounds. So Prism of Perception is also a looper with a few interesting features. So first of all, the delay times will go to up to 20 seconds. So it's possible to have longer loops. For example, I will set for now, for this example, the left channel to be around 3 seconds, the right channel to be about, let's say, 2 seconds. Right, I have here a voice that I can play. I have 12 key controlling, again, Prodigal Son from Flag going through a filter. Right, so I can play a few notes and record something. Right, and then I can freeze the delays, freeze the buffers, and things will just keep on looping. Right, we'll zoom in a bit. Now I can change the delay times, which will basically mean changing the buffer size. Right, so if I go, for example, with the left with a smaller buffer, right, and now that's really cool. I can also scan through the buffer and find the parts I would like to loop. Right, so we have for each of the channels, we have a scan control where I can scan through the buffer, no clicks, no anything. Right, and find the parts I would like to loop. Of course, this can be also used in a more creative way if you have a smaller, shorter buffer. Right, you can really create all sorts of different textures. Right, and sounds. Now each channel has also an end of cycle output that you can use, for example, to trigger modulation and then modulate the scanning. For now, again, because we have here a dual looper, I'm not going to use this as a stereo, I'm going to use this as left and right with individual channels. Right, let me solo, for example, just the left channel. So now we are listening just to the left looper here. Right, and I can use the end of cycle to trigger a modulation source. In this case, it will be the ADDR sequencer, and then in return modulate the scan. Right, create rhythms or rhythmic results. Right, and it's also possible to use the end of cycle to sync a whole patch and use it as a clock source. So now I will mute for a second both of them. And I have here the gate sequencer from impromptu sequencing a few drums. I will show you them in a second. Right, and I can use, let me just reset everything. I can use the right channel, the end of cycle of the right looper here to sync everything. So I will send this to a mult. This is the mult from VCV that will send this as a clock source to all of the different voices and sequences and whatnot. Right, and now you can see with each end of cycle, it will basically advance one step, but what we can do for using this as a clock source, we can multiply and divide the end of cycle, right? So you can use this to sync a whole patch. In the right-click menu, you have left and right end of cycle multiplication and division. I'm going to, let's say, because we have a longer buffer, so it's a slower clock, let's start with the multiplication of 8. Right, so now we are using this as a clock source. Let's go with the multiplication of 16 even, so multiply this by 2. Right, and now if I unmute the right channel, right, we have a loop that is in sync with the rest of the patch, because again, I'm using the end of cycle as a clock source. Right, I have here also a bass. Let me unmute the bass. This is the kick all from Befako. I will unmute this and then I will show you the drums. Right, so I have the kick from VCV. I have a tremor from Volt with a plateau as a reverb as the snare. And I have here the hi-hat. Let me solo the hi-hat. The hi-hat is going through Prism of Perception, which is the free version of Prism of Perception. It has a built-in filter in the feedback loop, right, which I'm modulating. Right, it has many of the features. It can also be synced to the clock. Right? So again, you can use the end of cycle to sync a whole patch and then have your loops synced to drums, to other sequences and so on. Another interesting feature Prism of Perception has is ducking that will control the volume of the processed signal, the wet signal, and can, for example, give space to the dry signal. So here I have a kick sequence. This is the gate sequencer from impromptu sequencing the VCV kick drum going through thorns from flag. Right, and this is going through the left channel of Prism of Perception of the delay. So if I bring in the mix, right now you can hear that the original kick has no space in all of this. It's all a one big mess. And for this, we can use the ducking feature. So by default, it will use the incoming signal, right, which is the kick in this case. So the dry signal, the kick will duck, will lower the volume of the delayed signal. And this will add more space to the original kick. If I take the mix all the way up, right, you can hear the ducking of level. Again, without and with. Right, so there is more space to the kick drum. I have here also a hi-hat, again the gate sequencer. In this case, it's the hi-hat from VCV, and this is going to the right channel. Again, this is a dual delay, so you can use this with two completely different voices. So the right channel is processing the hi-hat. Let me solo this for a second. Right, now also here I want to duck the processed signal, I want to duck the wet signal, but I don't want to use the incoming signal, I don't want to use the hi-hat, I want to use the kick drum, I want to use an external signal to duck the delayed signal in this case. So here we have, under the duck control, we have a CV input, or an input. Now this is not actually a CV input for the ducking, so this will not modulate the ducking amount. This is an external audio input that you can use for side chaining, so to use other sources, other audio sources to duck the processed signal. So again, in this case, I will use the kick drum. Right, if I bring the mix all the way up. Right, so now the delay signal is more rhythmic, related to the kick drum. Right, again without and with. I have here also a bass. This is the Bordel sequencer, sequencing kick all from Befaco. Again, going through Prism of Perception. Right, in this case, it's in the cross feedback mode that we looked at before. And again, also here I'm using the ducking with the kick drum. So the kick drum will duck the processed signal of the bass. Right, and I have another sequence. This is the 8sec sequencing the FM operator, and in this case I'm using Prism of Perception. Again, this is the free version of Prism of Perception, and also here we have the ducking feature, the same feature, the same control with the same external input if you want to use it. Right, so again, this can give more space to the dry signal or be used with external audio for side chaining. Prism of Perception has also send and return for each of the channels, right? So you can enter modules, you can enter effects inside of the feedback loop, processing the wet signal, the delayed signal, in all sorts of ways. For example, I have here a chord. So there is the chord CV module from Aaron Static, together with the nibble sequencer from Count Modular, sequencing a chord with the 2 FM operators. Right, going through Prism of Perception without and with a bit of ducking even. Right, and now I can place, for example, a low-pass filter inside of the feedback loop. I have here tangents from Volt. Right, so the send will go to the filter, and from the filter it will return into the feedback loop. If I take the mix all the way up, maybe add some resonance. Right, this is now just the delayed signal, just the processed signal. Right, basically with the low-pass filter processing only the wet, and I can also add some modulation to this with an LFO. Let's bring back the dry signal. Right, and we get this interesting effect. I have here a few more voices, so there is a kick, a bass with kick all, and a hi-hat, of course. And I have here a ride also from VCV, going again through Prism of Perception, right? And in this case I have a reverb to add some meat to the sound, and a comb filter in the feedback loop, as you can see, with the send and return. So if I take the mix all the way down, it will sound like this. I will solo this. Right, this is the ride, but then I can add some of the process signal. Again, reverb and a comb filter. Right. Another fun thing to do with Prism of Perception is using it as a voice, and it will also follow 1 volt per octave, so you can sequence it and create all sorts of textures. I have here a sequence. I have the 8-sac sequencing the VCO, going through the wave shaper Wolf from Volt. It will sound like this. Right, it's also going through Prism of Perception, and also through a low-pass filter that we will use in a second. Right, so first of all, what I will do, I will freeze the buffer, right, and take the mix all the way up. So now it's just the frozen buffer of Prism of Perception. Right, and now I can switch this to volt per octave mode. So here there are 2 modes. There is a clock mode, which will sync the delay to the clock, or volt per octave, where you can use the clock input or this CV input as a volt per octave. So if I use, for example, a copy of the sequence, right, as soon as I connect something, it will be tuned to the note C, and again it will follow volt per octave. Right, so now this is just the frozen buffer of Prism of Perception. Right, now I can scan through the buffer and change the texture, find different spots. I can also sequence this, right? I have here an ADDR sequencer that I can use to sequence the scanning. Right, and get different textures. I can also take this an octave down, for example, so you can see now it says 60 note. This is the note C. If I want 12 semitones down, this will be 48. Which is an octave. Right, I can also process this through the send and return. Again, the send and return will process only the wet signal, in this case the frozen buffer. So I will send this through a wave shaper. I have the wave shaper from Surge. Right, and now I can mix it in with the original sound. So if the mix is all the way down, this is the VCO going through Wolf. And now I can add a bit of this octave down processed sound. Right, so we get a fuller sound. Okay, now I will close the filter a bit just so it's not screaming all the time. Now we can also use this, of course, for carpless strong. So basically using a burst of noise or a short trigger to excite the delay, again in this case Prism of Perception. The feedback will control the decay time, and again it will follow volt per octave, so you can also sequence this. If I solo this voice for a second, right, I'm sending a trigger from the clock to the input, to the audio input of Prism of Perception. Right, and this will work again as a carpless strong, so I'm sequencing it with the ADDR sequencer, and again the feedback will control the decay time, left and right, and of course we can also modulate this. I have here sample and hold. Right, so you can use this also as a carpless strong voice. This is going also through a filter just for extra movement here. I have here also some drums. So I have the gate sequencer sequencing a kick, a clap, and tremor too. Right, and what I'm doing here, I'm mixing the drums, sending them through a bandpass filter, and then to another Prism of Perception that I'm using for glitch, basically. So I'm modulating the delay time, and I'm randomizing freeze and reverse on both channels, so we get this nice glitchy layer. Right? Very nice, and that was it. There's still a lot to explore with Prism of Perception. I really hope that you will enjoy it. Go check out the free Prism of Perception as well. Thank you for watching. Cheers.